What a day to be alive. We are live from Las Vegas recording Let's Open podcast at Money 2020-2023. I'm Gabriel Pereira. I'm founder of Let's Media, and we discuss weekly with industry leaders of open finance. And this time we're talking with industry giants, global giants of the industry. And I'm here with guys from Danilo, which everyone knows from our podcast, Danilo from Finance Tech. Right now with John Pitts from Plate and also Daniel from Open Wallet. It's a pleasure to receive you here. And how are you feeling at Money 2020?
Oh, if you ask me, for me it's joyful because for me it's so huge to discuss about not just the open finance, but I see all the things about banks and how we are involving our market. So for me it's blowing my mind.
And for me, for those who don't know, 3 days ago, the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the U.S., launched its open finance rulemaking after 13 years of waiting. So this is like Christmas and my birthday and Thanksgiving all wrapped up in one. You all may need to chain me to the table to prevent me from just going wild over the course of this podcast.
And we're gonna have a lot of ways to make a celebration of it.
Good. If you hear any popping in the background, that's the champagne corks flying around the room here.
Yeah, we're in Las Vegas. Who would have bet and gambled that this would happen eventually?
It's been a long, long time, but it's here, and I think we should be very happy about it.
And today we're going to talk about global connectivity. Actually, the idea is to say a word that is still difficult in Portuguese. That's global interoperability. And if the word is difficult, imagine how it would be to make it happen actually in the real world. So I'd like to ask you, because you have different perspectives from different countries, and how, like a quick intro of yourselves, and also how, in which kind of connectivity are you working right now in different countries? So just to understand which point of view you bring to the table today.
Yeah, so from my perspective, when you talk about interoperability, there are really three very different perspectives to that. One is technical interoperability. You need to be compatible. The second is regulatory interoperability. And the third one is business interoperability. If something costs so much money that it is okay, for the home market, but not in another market, even if you have technical and regulatory interoperability, you still are not able to use services in different countries. So I have a background in open banking. I'm the founder of a company called yes.com, which I sold at the end of last year. And we brought a little over 1,000 banks together in Germany to work on open banking. And I subsequently founded the Open Wallet Foundation together with the Linux Foundation. And I'm now working on open source software for digital wallets. But whatever your focus is, I think typically you are going to face those three obstacles and you have to find a way to overcome them.
And hi, John Pitts. I'm the head of policy at Plaid. We are a data access platform in the US, also doing business in Europe, and I would say, and Canada as well. Let me speak to the US market, because I think that's the one that might be most interesting to folks, because it's in some ways unique from what has happened in other open banking, open finance markets. In the US, as I like to say, we've got more small o, small f open finance than any other country, in that the adoption of open finance practices is incredibly robust, driven by very high consumer demand. Plaid alone, for example, we connect to 10,000 banks, and we have over 8,000 customers who are doing open banking. Roughly 1 in 3 US consumers has connected one bank account to one app via just Plaid. So this is at scale open finance in the United States. However, there has been no regulatory framework around that open finance, which is very different from, Daniel, what you've seen in Europe, where it started with the regulation and then the practices grew up around that regulation. As a result, US market today, let's talk about one of the key forms of interoperability. How is the data being accessed? In the US, for Plaid, 75% of our data access is over API. But that 75% is from the largest 10 banks and the smallest 5,000 banks.
Yeah.
In the middle are thousands of banks where screen scraping is still the method of access. And so one of the most important things that's happening in the US market now is a transition from screen scraping to API as the method of access, which is a huge opportunity to build interoperability and ensure that the API is a consistent API and doesn't just become a new barrier to entry for people who want to do open finance. That's one of the key parts of what the regulator is pushing on right now. I think it's the most exciting and dynamic part of the US market right now, and it's one of the things where Plaid has tried to lead this transition into APIs, but we're leading 10,000 different banks of different sizes and different capabilities into changing and building APIs. It's been a hard push, but I think we're starting to finally see the end in sight of that transition.
Perfect. And when we see the Latin perspective, besides of Brazil, because Brazil has your own regulation, and the regulation is too strong enough to have all the banks connected, and but not to data. That is a very important point, because we have the data is some few banks, but it's the largest banks that is included in the data. But the main point in Brazil is about the payments, and we process more than 1 million payments by day in Brazil using the Pix. We have more than 1 trillion transactions in a month using the Pix. And with the open banking rail, we have the opportunity to not to change this number, but have a better use case for that. And when we use the data in Latin perspective more than Brazil is quite difficult, because you don't have this interoperability between the countries in Latin. When we see the Chile is coming on, and we see Colombia, and we see Mexico, we see another countries like Peru and Argentina and Uruguay. These guys talk with each other, but they are talking in a way that is, even they don't have the screen scraper. They are exchanging papers.
Yeah.
So if you are moving, yeah, it's like that. And we have this need, because a lot of people who lives in Colombia wants to live in Chile, or people in Brazil wants to live in Colombia, or anything like that. And we don't have a rail that you can exchange this data with security. That is the main point here, because we can't connect with these banks. But now that we have the regulation in Brazil, and our perspective for Latin is that we have the regulation in Chile and in other countries, we can connect using the same rails. Even with the US and Europe, we can give this data for the banks in the US, we can give this data for the Europe, in a way that we are using just the regulated matter to do that.
And it's interesting also, Daniel mentioned this technical interoperability, and we must say that in Brazil we use a lot of this with Pix. When we talk about instant payment, we talk about the ISO that we use to develop the infrastructure of the Pix. And when we talk about open finance, talk the Open ID Foundation, we talk about some elements that we use technically to this that could be reused in different markets. You mentioned that maybe we can use this in other countries, but how this is working right now? I'm not just talking about the regulation, but that's the technical part. Because what I heard is that when you go to Europe, for example, you have a lot of aggregators, and that's a challenge by design, because you have to connect everything. So if you want to connect, I don't know, Europe with other continents, if you want to connect with other place, what technical challenge would be? We could overcome this. How we imagine this happening?
I think it depends, how you want to make that connection work. The less compatibility you have, the more you need aggregators, and the more you need companies basically doing the wiring and the plugging for you. And I believe even for an aggregator such as Plaid, it is actually beneficial to have a little more technical interoperability. I think the problem really starts even before the engineers getting together. The problem starts with the mindset. Do we try to create solutions in silos, in geographical silos? Do we try to create solutions in silos pertaining about the use case? Or is there a will to say eventually the goal is to ensure that those things are going to work around the globe? And that's just very rarely happening. And maybe for good reason. If you are trying to start something, you try to do it first for your domestic market. But on the other hand, there are great best practices globally. And in my opinion, any solution should start with a view around the world, saying, okay, what are the best ideas around the globe in terms of authentication? And then for people to get together and say, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can actually embrace some ideas together.
Like give you an example of a use case. I came from Brazil to Monday 2020, and I bought some stuff for my podcast in Brazil. And I went to Amazon, and was supposed to receive a huge discount if I use Amazon credit card.
Yep.
I should apply, but I never receive a credit card from Amazon without any information that I have from Brazil. So if I have a way to bring my information from Brazil and share this information with Amazon here in the US, probably I would receive a credit card, like a basic credit card at least. So this is a kind of opportunity of business opportunity that we are losing because we are not capable to see this over like between countries.
Yeah. Sorry, John. Just adding the technical part of what Daniel just said, and picking our example for this is that the use case, the business use case, is very clear to us. But when we are talking in the engineering of IT, of technology engineering, we see a lot of trouble with that because in countries like our country and in Brazil, we don't have too much people who are engaged with this project. I can say that because we was, I think, the only one in the region in Latam working with the OpenID Foundation for 2 years at least. And now with the Open Wallet, we have this thing to work with the Open Wallet. But if I do that as a technical, maybe I would be the one who is working with. We see this in GAIN, Global Assurance Identity Network. We was the only one. Me and Daniel, who is from my team, was one of the only us of Latam. So this is the problem here, that we need to engage the technical community that is larger than that. But for this, our companies like me, that I'm on a company who is based on the open finance, I need to incentive my team to be part of this movement, the technical part, the business part. That is, we have a lot of opportunity to that. So why not?
Well, and that is an area where Plaid has invested in that technical part, because let me, Gabriel, you just gave an example of sort of the use case from a consumer perspective, but let's talk about it from a business perspective, because Plaid is mostly a B2B company. We support a lot of businesses, and I have never met a fintech that says, Canada is our market, and we never want to expand from Canada into another market. No, that's not how you think as a founder. That's not how you think as a growing business. Your goal is, if you've got a great fintech product in Canada, you'd love to launch it in the UK. If it's great in the UK, you'd love to launch it in Germany. And I think what we see here a little bit in fintech and technical standards is there's a bit of a tension between how financial services regulators think, which is usually financial services just happens in my country and I'm responsible for how it happens in my country, versus how tech folks tend to think, which is the more consistent and global this standard is, the better, because what we care about is scaling, and national borders don't really matter all that much for scaling technology. And what I'm optimistic on in fintech, and particularly these data standards, is that we've done some of this before. So if you think about SWIFT for cross-border payments, that is a standard technical language that everyone can use to move funds to any country in the world. Everyone agreed that that would be the technical standard. I think we can do the same thing in open finance. Full disclosure, Plaid is on the board of one standard setting organization, the Financial Data Exchange. It does the technical standards for the US and Canada. I think there's an opportunity to either partner with some of the other groups like Berlin Group or OBIE's successor, I guess, some of those other organizations, and say, hey, is there a way for us to align our standards to each other? Because the standards are still quite nascent. The reality, just for everyone, even in the US, not every bank that is an FTX board member has exactly the same, FTX API that they've deployed. Daniel and I were talking about this before, even in the UK where everyone has a government mandated, you must use the OBI, right? This is the API, everyone go build exactly this, and then they're all slightly different, right?
Yeah.
So if we have competing standard setting bodies and then everyone is implementing the standard slightly differently, you've still got basic chaos. You don't have real interoperability. I think if FTX and others can sort of come to a understanding that what we're aiming for is financial services is still going to be different in each country, but you can do a SWIFT-like approach to saying the data standard for those technical services can be the same everywhere. That gives us the opportunity to actually have real cross-border expansion so that not just consumers can get that credit card when they go to a different country, but the business that wants to serve that consumer can expand into new markets and do it easily and at scale, knowing that the rails work the same way in each country as they go. And I think from a technical perspective, that's the barrier that we should be attacking from a business perspective, because the easier we make that interoperability, the more scaled opportunity there is for growth.
But right now I'm trying to be more practical, and because of course the international connectivity has a lot of challenges, but let's start to imagine the domestic issue. How we overcome this challenge, because as we mentioned right now, in Brazil, we have this standard, but even though we have this standard, has different implementations for different institutions. How we overcome this kind of challenges, and what we could achieve once we move forward? Because I don't know, we could have received more use cases, more fintechs participating. I don't know how we could overcome this.
Okay, what I see is that we should agree in the same way of the technical standards. That is the main point. We have a lot of technical, a very good technical standards. So we have the OpenID Foundation. All the profiles that we have there is very good. And now we have the FIDO Alliance that also has a lot of good standards too. But as John said, was brilliant. Once again, we need to have a clear view of what we want for the future, and it's like the SWIFT, we need to agree with the same technical standard. When we see the rail, it's more than that, because we have the rail, but we also have this standard. A company like us that wants to provide the service of connectivity between the banks, so I want to provide this connection, and how I provide it in Brazil, I want to provide for another banks. I need to have something that is clear to us what I need to develop, and what I'm involving, and what is the practical, because now I need to develop for OpenID, I have FIDO, I have a lot of standards in our platform, and by the end, we need to connect all these things. So if we have this clear view about the technical standards, the use case will come around. It's like the use case is popping up if you have the implementation going on.
Yeah, and let me just give a quick use case there, Gabriel, similar to your experience of coming in and looking at that Amazon credit card. One of my favorite moments was the first time I got off of a plane from the US in Europe, and I got the push notification from my mobile company saying, hey, your phone can work in the UK. Would you like to pay $5 a day for your phone to work in the UK? You don't need to change your SIM card or anything. We've worked all the stuff out behind you. That's an amazing moment for me as a consumer, because it means that technology works in any country that I travel to in Europe, even though I'm still using a US cell carrier, because they've figured out the interoperability on the back end. Imagine that for financial services, right? You show up in another country, and I go to Brazil and I get a push notification in my Apple Wallet saying, oh, would you like to be able to use Pix while you're here? By the way, I hope everyone in Brazil knows how jealous everyone else in the rest of the world is of how well you all have executed Pix. It is really an astonishing leadership role you've taken in good payments. But that to me is the killer use case of, I can show up, I don't need to understand all of the technology, I don't need to understand how to make it work, I don't need to go sign up for anything, I just automatically can make myself eligible to the financial services of each country as I travel because the infrastructure has been built out for me. That's the use case I think we're talking about here.
Creating the standards and the technology here is really the easy part. I think the difficult part is creating the relationships and the trust. This is if you have a couple of engineers. You mentioned Berlin Group and you mentioned FTX, and those are not technical issues. The issue really is that no one should swoop in and say, "Look, we figured it all out." Whether it's in Europe or in the US, just relax, sit back, enjoy the ride, forget everything you've done so far. Just take what we have done, right? So I think it is important, and this is what you mentioned GAIN. This is what we were trying with the GAIN paper also, to basically get the implementers together, get the people together who are actually in the trenches doing that and trying to build trust and start from a position of saying we really need to figure this out. One, we mentioned before the business that we're going to lose if those services don't work cross-border. But there is something a lot closer to people. I was in China earlier this year, and I was not just unable to pay for things, but I was unable to order for food. Because in this restaurant, they're using apps to order for food. So I literally had to leave hungry. Hadn't I been saved by a waitress who allowed me to basically use her phone to order the food and then pay for the food, and then I gave her the money in cash. This is not just a luxury. This is not just something that we ought to do in order to, make even more money and increase some already lofty valuations. This is something that at the end, if we fail to do it, will hurt us as people.
Yeah, you mentioned that I passed from the same example in the Washington airport, the Ronald Reagan, that you have a restaurant right after the security, and you must order in the
QR code.
QR code and the pad, but my phone doesn't work, never work.
We are heading to the end of our conversation, and I want to bring the last subject to discussion, which is the wallet situation. Because I read a recent study. I think I always mistake the letters, but it's CFPB.
Yes.
Okay, the CFPB discussing about the interoperability of wallets in US and how this could affect the competition and better services and offering for the end customer. I'd like to understand about this interoperability of wallets and how do you manage to all of this from this point of view of Open Wallet Foundation and of course your point of views as well to complement this discussion.
So, Daniel, let me start and talk about what the CFPB has proposed, because I actually am really interested to hear your reaction to this. But let me summarize it for everyone so we understand it. The CFPB, and by the way, if you want to remember that acronym, chicken fried peanut butter. It will be in your head for the rest of your life.
Chicken fried official Plaid.
That is the official Plaid perspective on it. Yes, think about that agency. Yes. So, what CFPB has done is said data access is required for payment accounts, credit card accounts, and digital wallets. Now, that means that fintechs are a data source as well for open finance in the US. That's quite different than what other markets did, especially quite different than what Europe did, where it was basically a competition mandate with a one-way flow of data from banks to fintechs. The US is going to be a two-way flow of data, which I think is the right answer anyway. It's the consumer's data. They have the right to share it wherever it may be. And it's also better for competition because banks can get fintech data, fintechs can get bank data, all with consumer consent, but whoever has the best product in that market wins. I also think that's quite exciting for wallet interoperability, because there are some wallet providers in the US where they want to build a walled garden. They want you in their system only. And this is going to open those walls to allow that data between wallets to be more transportable. Now, there are other things that you might want to pay attention to in terms of like how the RFID chips are working and whether they're in a proprietary code. This isn't going to solve all of those things, but this is where I'm interested in your perspective, Daniel. Like, I do think this is a real and significant step forward into giving consumers more choice and control when they're using a digital wallet, because their data in that wallet is going to be transportable and portable the same way it would be at a bank account.
Yeah, so I completely agree with the ultimate goal. I think the ultimate goal is consumer choice, and consumers should have a choice in solutions that preserve their privacy, that are secure, and if you want to have choice, you do need interoperability, because if there's no interoperability, choice becomes really, really difficult. Now, when it comes to walled gardens, it's interesting when you look at this across different use cases and domains and across countries, there is a danger of walled gardens on every level of the value chain. So some countries are thinking about creating a walled garden around their credentials. So you could have countries that say, I will issue my driver's license or my identity card only to a wallet that I publish. That's not a big tech walled garden. That's now a walled garden by a government. You could have, of course, you mentioned wallet providers that probably try to create walled gardens. You have hardware folks that are trying to create walled gardens around specific elements of, for instance, chips in the mobile phone. And I believe ultimately, if we want a free flow from credentials, and it doesn't, whatever that credential may be, could be access to a bank account, could be a tokenized credit card or debit card or a driver's license or car keys or FIDO pass keys, health data, your university degree. Ultimately, if you want those credentials to flow freely in an open ecosystem, you need to bring people together to agree on some technical standards, on some trust frameworks, and then you need to agree that this free flow is really something we all want. The public sector wants, the private sector wants, and in my opinion, there is an overwhelming consensus that is shared by most governments and most companies that this free flow is really in everyone's interest. And the approach that we're taking with Open Wallet, and the reason why we're focusing on open source software is because, again, just like we've seen in open banking, different jurisdictions are embracing different credential formats and different protocols. And you have W3C verifiable credentials, for instance, here in the US with the Department of Homeland Security. You have non-creds in Canada. You have SDJOTs and MDLs that the European Union is favoring. So we're not going to magically solve that overnight, but what I hope we're able to do is essentially get everyone who's interested in this interoperability together to create open source building blocks for wallets. So you can think of it a little like a train. In an ideal world, every train track in the world would have the exact same width, and the electricity would be the exact same. Now, that's just wishful thinking. That's not going to happen. So the next best thing basically is to say, okay, let's build some components that we as manufacturers of trains can use, so that the train you are building in Latin America and you are building as Plaid can use those components, and as we move from one use case to another or one country to another, trains can easily adapt to the change of train tracks or electricity.
Yeah, perfect. And that was a very clear view. And one of the things that I say in Brazil when I think in digital wallets, I always say that, and have one of guys that here that owns a bank that is here. And I talk a lot with him about the ownership of this data, because today I don't think that I'm on the data. It's not like that, because my data is in the bank. Besides that, I have the right to move this data to one person, to one bank, to another bank, to another player. I don't want that, because I don't have this with me. We have this type of identity sovereignty that you don't have this today. We don't have a digital wallet that is similar.
It's like the guys from crypto say, it's not your keys, it's not your coins.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
And
it's not your data.
in the end, it's like that because in Brazil or in another countries, if you delete all your identity, you are no one. You don't have anything that you can do to get back to the system. You don't have this type of thing. And now with digital wallets, and when you have something like that that is open source, you can have a solution that you have your own, the ownership of your identity, and the sovereign identity that we discuss in another groups is very important, because that is what can drive us for something that I can interoperability between countries. I can bring my identity to the US, and you can bring to Brazil. Besides that, in Brazil, we have this the same thing that we share the data between fintechs and the banks, but it's the same thing because you are sharing your data with a fintech, but the fintech has this data. You can bring this back to another banks, but you can bring back to your home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always like on this cubicle of the open banking ecosystem. And I would like to ask you, John, that the consumers of Play ecosystem are benefiting from like identity, like onboarding facilitating, like they have this credential that they made in one place, but they have like an easy UX in another place that in the same ecosystem right now, right?
Yeah, so it's really just at the UX and the ease of onboard right now. It is not quite what I would consider the dream, which is federated identity, which means, once you get KYC'd at one institution, that KYC is portable with you as you move. We do not have that in the US. Everyone has their own independent KYC obligations. It's a significant area of cost for most institutions to have to replicate, basically confirming the identity of the same person
market.
over and over. But with Open Finance, identity information is part of Open Finance in the CFPB's proposal. That means that some basic ability of saying, okay, we've got the name and all the other identity information from institution one, we can populate it into institution two. We can also build in some fraud signals, ways to identify whether that's a synthetic ID, whether someone is trying to blend things together, that makes that KYC process better, faster, and cheaper. It's not quite all the way there to that pure identity portability that I think we all probably want, but this is, I think, to be frank, portable identity is even harder than portable financial data and open finance to get to, and it'll be probably the next step down the market for everyone.
I'd like to ask you, what is the next phase for interoperability, or what's the next big thing on your market, on your point of view for each one of your three?
Okay, I will start. For our market, we are connecting those countries that we are working on. Also, we are connecting Brazil with Chile and also with Colombia. And Chile with Colombia also, so we can make this data exchange be more reliable, more security. We can do this more easily for the banks. That is the next step that we are working on, but we are working on by our own. We don't have the regulation to that. What we are doing is like we are working with the regulation in Brazil, and we work with the same regulation in Chile, and we make sure that we are seeing what is happening with this data, and we are compliant with the regulation between these countries, and the data is floating with the consent of the customer.
Great.
And for us in the US market, the proposed open finance rule from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau proposal already came out. Comments are due December 29th. The rule is expected to be finalized fall next year, so that's the big thing. How does that rule get finalized? How does it support interoperability? Very excited to see what happens next.
We launched 7 months ago with 37 members. In the meantime, we are 54 with Google and Microsoft, amongst others, joining Open Wallet. We're going to announce 2 strategic relationships at 1:30 p.m. here in Las Vegas, and we're very excited about that.
Tell us.
The briefing room, 1:30 p.m. And we will later this year formally launched the Governmental Advisory Council. We have spoken a little bit about that. It's something that ICANN, for instance, does the global domain name system, and we're very excited that we now have already 9 countries that signed up to the Governmental Advisory Council, as we believe that wallets are essentially containers that will hold credentials both from the public sector as well as the private sector. So wallets really should be something that both the public and the private sectors are working on together, and this is what we hope to be able to do at Open Wallet. So we are really excited about this year so far, and are looking forward to the rest of 2023.
So 11:30.
1:30
1:30. Okay, I was thinking that it was during the evening.
No. It's, we're in Europe, not in. We're in the US, so not Latin American time zones, but yeah, here at 1:30 in the briefing room.
Okay, amazing, guys. I would like to thank you for accepting the invitation. It was amazing to receive you here. Actually, for me, it's a personal achievement to bring all of you here and make this happen during the Money 2020. So I'm really glad to receive you here, and I'm pretty sure that our audience is gonna be crazy listening to this episode. So thank you very much, and for everyone who are listening to us, we see you next week. I hope you enjoy, and for sure share with everyone in your company. We see you on next episode. See you later. Bye guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.